on. Let's get started here. All right. Um, a little, an interesting week for certain. A lot of different things to get into. Um, but what I guess we can start with, just to kind of get it out of the way.
Of course.
Um, the comments that were made. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I figure just to get out in front of it. Um, the the story, the ongoing story that is. And I don't know why it's even a story now because I mean the election is over. There's nothing that can be done. I don't even necessarily believe that the podcast in of itself had anything to do with the election. But that's what we have been, made to believe that Trump went on Joe Rogan and he was able to sway a bunch of casuals into voting for him because he was articulate and forthright about some things. Even though there was a lot of stuff that I kind of feel like didn't really get answered. Kind of took a bit of a turn. I don't want to get too much into that. Obviously, the podcast is months old. But now it is being accused. Joe Rogan is being accused of more or less like staging the rejected podcast from Kamala, like almost as if like he set it up to not happen, which is completely untrue.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. I don't know if it was her or someone on her committee or whatever the fuck, but it was somebody basically saying that basically she was never given an opportunity or never really given like a fair shake to come on, which wasn't true. The problem is that they wanted Joe to like go out to where she was, and basically they wanted it, as he said in that clip that I sent you, they want, the footage he has wasn't going to be edited, and they wanted to edit footage, to make it to where it would make her look good. And it's just
right.
And there are people going like, well, she couldn't have a conversation for 3 hours. She didn't need to have a conversation for 3 hours. If you feel like you're good for like an hour and a half, I'll appreciate that.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Joe, I don't even think Joe wanted an hour and a half. I think he wanted no less than at least, let's just go. If it goes an hour and a half, then it goes an hour and a half. If it goes 2 hours, and let's go 2 hours. But she wasn't giving anything. She didn't even give herself a chance. She didn't give Joe a chance. And the whole time Joe was saying, look, I wanted to get to know her as a person. I wanted to get to know her, more as a politician, flesh out some of her policies, maybe talk about, meeting Doug. I mean, just really try to do what Howard Stern did, just in a less, kiss-assy sort of way.
No, don't do what Howard Stern does. Do what Joe Rogan does.
Well, did you see how Stern handled Kamala?
We watched the Stern thing on here.
Right, we did, right? When he said that
we watched it on here,
and I can't even imagine the next years or what have you.
Yeah, it was very fucking hacky. No, it's because
Stern literally said, I can't even imagine the sun rising. I can't even imagine the fucking sun breaking through the clouds if Donald Trump is elected again. These were the thoughts of Howard Stern.
Yeah, I guess the point, and I thought about this, and the point I got at was that most people, especially politicians, are either going to be good at telling the truth or they're going to be good at lying. Kamala and her team seems to be bad at telling the truth and lying. They're not good at either. I don't know how you are bad at both, but somehow she is just, you're now going to make it seem like that Joe didn't want you on. No, Joe wanted you on. And then at one point in his discussion with Dan Richards, he had said that if you wanted to come at like midnight after you did your rally, I would have done it at midnight. She was given so many opportunities to do it, and my guess is that she's probably kicking herself in the pants. She didn't do it, but she has to frame it to where it seemed like that, oh, Joe didn't want me on. There was all these ridiculous hoops and hurdles. No, you were the one who caused the ridiculous hoops and hurdles. You're the one who felt like you needed to have it staged. You needed to have stenographers. You needed to have we can only talk about, like, you can only ask certain questions, so on and so forth. Donald Trump got pushed on like Joe pushed Donald Trump on if the 2020 election was really rigged or not. He pushed him on that. That was a pretty, like, Joe wasn't really entirely convinced that it was, and he was pushing Trump on that. So, I understand that Trump's going to be better for interviews like this because he's been in, media and shit like that. But if you're going to be, yet again, in the highest, position in this country, you're going to have to learn how to do interviews. And yet again, I know people out there going like, she couldn't handle a 3-hour interview. I would have preferred, if she can't do 3 hours, you don't need to compete. If you feel like you can get all your points out and you can feel like you can have a discussion within an hour and a half, I'll appreciate that. If 3 hours is too much for someone, then 3 hours is too much for someone. You don't need to overdo it.
Right. And I think that was the big part that Joe was pushing. Joe was not putting a timestamp on anything. He was simply saying, look, I just wanted to get to know her. I just wanted to talk to her. I just wanted to figure out, who in the fuck it is that we could be potentially electing. And I don't want to beat the dead horse with Kamala and talk about the voices that she would make and all the silly catchphrases and all the goofy gimmicks, because frankly, it's over. But what I'm really concerned about going forward is that the Democratic Party, they find someone who is going to organically bond with the people who they are standing in front of, asking for their votes, asking for their confidence, that we aren't going to get this cartoon character. That we're not going to get this, sort of now, obviously, we're never going to be in a position again where we have 120 days till the election and we have to fit 30 pounds of shit into a 15-pound bag. That's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
But in the emergency that something were to go down and you would need someone, you're going to need someone by next year, because we already know that come summer of 27, we are going to start hearing about JD's endorsement, about Trump endorsing JD, about who his running mate might be. Frankly, this might be scary to some people, but I would not be surprised to see a JD DeSantis campaign for 28. That's all well and good.
I would put Vivek in the spot of DeSantis, in my opinion. But DeSantis is fine too. I'm just more of a Vivek guy.
Well, no, you're right. I think JD and Ramaswamy will probably be the billing for 28, and that means that Democrats are going to have someone in there, and it's going to have to be, and not Gavin, for fuck's sake, not Mr. Newsom. All right. But it's going to have to be someone who's believable and strong and has, has some kind of constitution to themselves, and isn't just a chameleon and in whatever, ethnic group of people that happen to be in the room we're going to, try to assimilate with. I just found that goofy.
Well, that and like, as I said earlier, I've never found someone who is so bad at being honest and dishonest at the same time. Because at least with most politicians, they're not very good at telling the truth, but they're generally good at being deceptive. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but you can read them for who they are. I'm just saying, especially with that what was recently said and Joe Rogan and Dan Richards talking about it, it just baffles me that now you're going to make it seem you're going to now lie and make it seem like Joe wasn't trying to like extend the olive branch. I've never seen someone have the olive branch extended to them so many times that you just keep smacking it away from them. It just what needs to happen here is whether she runs again or not, and I know she's not going to do this, but what she needs to do is she needs to come clean and say, yeah, I'm the reason why I didn't go on Joe Rogan. I'm the reason why my VP didn't go on there either. But yet we let John Fetterman go on there for some reason, which is just...
Yeah, right. See, that's what I didn't understand, why that Walz just didn't go. If we're so concerned about having some sort of... Well, people also felt that if Kamala went on, it would hurt her brand. For her key supporters in that key demo who live and die by everything on a scale of identity. The concept of Kamala going on and having civil discourse and, laughing it up with Joe Rogan, that wouldn't have been on brand for her, is what some of the correspondents are saying. Some of the people that were on her team are saying.
Which when you really analyze that, it's a little concerning. You're saying it's not on brand for someone to have a civil discussion, and it's like what Joe said in that clip. If she likes laughing, then hey, why not have a better place to laugh than be here and do it? It's a room. Right. A lot of laughs have been had on that podcast, whether you like her or not. Have some more. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. And to not spend too much time on this, because it is old hat and it is long over. But I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying here, and if anything, what I find to be really unfortunate is that it is off brand. Okay, in 2024, in the information age that we live in, and how the information age that we live in, and how much actually gets absorbed from podcasts, from social media. When you look at at podcasts or at new media in general, okay, the Joe Rogan Experience takes it's top shelf. So for the vice president, who at the time she was the sitting vice president, who could have became the first female president, the fact that she felt that she couldn't go on the biggest podcast in America, it's telling. But not to spend all fucking night on that.
Of course. I didn't want to spend all night. I figured it was good for about 15 minutes. I just felt like that was worth talking about that. Like I said before, I'll say it again, that I've never met someone who's who's just so unable to tell the truth, but is so bad at lying at the same exact time. And in her in the statement by her team committee or whoever the fuck, saying that it would be off brand for her to have a civil, genuine discussion and have some laughs, even though we see her cackle everywhere. Why? And that's just it should, whether you like Joe Rogan or not, and whether you're a Democrat or not, it should concern you to where you hear that it's off brand for someone to sit down and just have a genuine discussion. You
think her and Joe would have had some laughs about how she was raised by a single mother, and
sure. I'm not.
It's all bullshit.
Yeah, I'm. If that's where they want to go with it, sure.
You know what? Honestly, Joe, I can picture in my head, because Joe is going to be the accommodator. I could picture she gets there. There's some wine on ice waiting for her. There's nice glasses. Joe has some wine. She has some wine. They chatted up. Joe would have been tickled pink. She would have been giggling at shit that makes no sense, and Joe would have been laughing along. It would have been like an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Like it truly would have been. And can you imagine living in a world where Kamala would have like won Texas somehow because she went on Joe Rogan's podcast? Like, what if we were addressing number 47 as Kamala Harris? Just because she would have stepped in that studio and it would have changed everything. We would right now, we would be sending young men to the front lines in Ukraine if she would have won. All from Joe's podcast.
Speaking of Ukraine, I think this is a good time to segment into the U.S. aid.
Oh
stuff.
my God! So in what way? How are we supplying aid to Ukraine by making sure that their drag performers are? We're sending drag performers to the Ukraine to do shows like it's the fucking USO. We're paying for Ukrainian fashion designers to go to Paris Fashion Week. We are paying for just a lot of shit that it blows your mind when you find out, okay, $22 billion in aid for Ukraine. Does this now mean, by the way, that, I mean, maybe this has always happened, but does this now mean that that the rumors are true, that it is all money laundering, that it is very well indeed just a means to an end for world leaders to sort of trade resources back and forth? They do it all secretly. And the fact that we keep being told that more aid is needed in Ukraine, that we have to give funds to Gaza, and we hear all about these foreign wars and all the people that seemingly need the U.S.'s help. Transgender comic books in Peru, Jimmy. What does this even mean?
My problem with all of it is that look, I'm all for one. Look, if you want to help other nations, I don't have an issue with it. But you got to put, like, other countries put themselves first. Why aren't we putting ourselves first right now? Like, look at the state of our economy. Like, the homeless crisis is still bad here. You've got, the war on drugs. You've got shit going on with immigration. It looks like Trump is starting to crack down on that. But, instead we are making, we have stuff like U.S. aid, as I think you remember that shitty fucking border bill that was only called a border bill just to make people think that the bill was being passed and, oh my God, Republicans rejected a border bill. No, Republicans didn't reject a border bill. Republicans rejected a bill that had stuff like sending foreign aid to Ukraine and a bunch of other stuff, things that didn't really have anything to do with that. Look,
right, and that's the other thing that's the problem, Jimmy. The term foreign aid, it's very androgynous in its nature. We're not explaining what we are aiding with. We assume that the war, and then of course when we're aiding in war, you have to be able to send non-perishable food items, and I imagine we send plenty of toiletries and plenty of clothing and plenty of all that good stuff. We probably gave them lumber to rebuild. We probably gave them all sorts of resources. I know for a fact we are rebuilding schools and hospitals, and we're doing a lot of things in Ukraine. $30 billion worth of repairs and aid. But where in that budget? This is how you know it's frivolous, okay? Mm-hmm. I have no issue us helping Palestine. I have no issue with us helping Israel. I have no issue with us helping Ukraine. It doesn't matter what side of these wars you're on and who you view as the ally. I don't mind aiding in war. I don't think we should be on the front lines of it. But if we want to help someone else out that can't fight for themselves, um, the American way seems to be, sure thing, pal. Here's a couple bucks.
My problem is that how do you it's like what Jordan Peterson has said. If you can't keep your house in order, how do you expect to set the world in order? And our house over here is shit at the moment. And we're trying to set the rest of the world in order. We're not completely in order right now. Like, it's just. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm glad that Trump is cutting all the fucking bullshit to fucking Ukraine, and I don't care if that pisses people off. Sorry, it's my taxpayer money. If you want to donate to Ukraine, that's fine. Do it. I'm not cool with it right now because of all the shit that's going on here. Like, some of you motherfuckers.
And my question is, how much more aid do you need? Is my real question.
Yeah, and why does the aid have to be strictly financial? Like, if you needed help with supplies and shit like that, or like, and stuff like that, I would be a little more okay with it.
Have too. We've given them tanks. We've given them all kinds of things.
I'm talking. Well, the tanks are concerning. It's like
we have literally just given them tanks. We've given them fucking all kinds of things, Jim.
Like, but the other question,
all kinds of shit.
The other question I also have to ask is that why can't Ukraine do what we did during World War II? Why can't everybody pitch in and you build yourself up? Everybody does that, as a nation, because think about it. In the future, if Ukraine gets into another fucking dispute, they can't knock on our door now because Trump ain't gonna fucking throw them the money. It's not gonna happen. So I mean, what's gonna happen now? I mean, you kind of like Zelensky kind of fucked himself here because it's just like.
And also, and I've never been on board with the black or white sort of reasoning of where if you are anti-war, then you are pro-Putin, or you are just kowtowing to Putin. Personally, I don't get why we need to be a part of the war efforts at all. And I would like to know, what other key countries, can do, because right now, the Ukrainian aid. We have given a hefty amount, and I want to show you, a quick chart, and then we will go on to something else.
Okay.
But just a chart here of what is going on, and as you can see, America has given most of it. And then you have country like the EU has given quite a bit. Germany and the United Kingdom have given some. Japan's given some. Italy has given a little bit. France has given a little bit. But clearly, we are the top donors here. All the other countries gave what they could and put a cap on it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that, look, there's providing aid, and then there's effectively being, for lack of a better term, a sugar daddy. For lack of a better, I'm sorry, it's the truth.
I mean, if we really started going down the list of everybody that owed us money, France owes us probably $1 billion. Canada owes us several billion. Australia owes us a lot of money, as does Germany. And, all of those countries, all countries borrow from each other. We're all indebted to each other. And the U.S. just seems to be too nice, and we don't go back and collect our debts from people. If we started doing that, we would have a lot different of a landscape. but it's probably better that we are not trying to collect all of our funds from people, especially while we are trying to stay out of the war.
Well, on top of that, I think we just need to regroup and just rebuild here, reforge here, and just, and just that's what we have to do. We have to fix our shit here. I mean, that's all I can really say.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this. There's a lot on the docket, especially as we look at now. Okay, the obviously the election is over. We are 2 weeks in to February.
Yeah,
and we are going to have a long, interesting 4 years ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that I really have is, okay,
Yes.
when we start talking about, oh, we have to clean up from the inside, and we have to change our infrastructure around and all of that. Well, how are we going to do that? We need to start discussing that. In the way that we give all of this money and we put all of these efforts in doing all of this shit around the world. But what we don't seem to do is discuss, okay, well, our cost of living is sky high. Well, how do we get it better? All right, the average job in many states, unfortunately, is Walmart or McDonald's. All right, well, how do we fix that problem? How do we get it so that each state or each cluster of states has their own industry, their own export of some kind to really get people back to work and not, have to rely on flipping burgers and door dashing or whatever to actually make a living. We actually have some real jobs and some real prospects.
Yeah.
We're going to have to fix the schools, and it's not going to be by abolishing the Department of Education either.
I really, you know what? I don't care if I sound like a dick for it. I kind of hope they do abolish the.
Well, what's going to happen? Okay, well, Jimmy, let me ask you this. Okay, let's take an example here.
Okay.
All right, you're out in the Panhandle, and and let's say you are the parent of a couple of children. And let's say that the closest private school would be what? Probably like a Catholic school in Scotts Bluff somewhere. I mean, I couldn't even think of where a private school is. So where are your children going to go? Where are all the children in Chadron going to go to school? Where are all these children? Where are you gonna? Are you gonna tell the kids that are already going to like Banner County School, where it's literally a schoolhouse and everybody fucking fills in, that they're now going to have to,
as opposed to what fucking like with the way that public schools are ran now? Come on, man. They're like public schools are shit now, man. Like,
I mean, I'm not saying that they don't need improvement. That's what I'm saying is that we absolutely need to improve our public schools because if we don't, I don't know what the alternative is, unless if we are going to make some sort of proposal, albeit controversial or not. Okay, and again, this only works if you are a married couple, because if you're single or if you're divorced, the idea of having a stay-home mom,
oh, you're starting to cut out.
Hopefully we'll be all right. But it's just something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, because if you are in New York City, there are plenty of private institutions or preparatory schools or just simply public schools that are better. So if I am living if I live, let's say if I'm near like 150th okay, if I'm way the fuck up there, and I would rather my kids, now this is going to be a really weird example, okay, but let's say I would rather my kids go to school on the Upper East Side. Well, that's going to be a fucking 45-minute trip every day. The school bus, if you can take, now in New York City, you're on your own devices. You fucking take a city bus to get to school. You did it growing up, I'm sure. But again, what is that to say for people in the Panhandle who say, I really don't want my kid going to X high school? Do I drive to where? To Rushville? And say, oh, I've spoken to the principal and I've spoken to the staff, and I really like what they're doing with the place, so I'm gonna send my kid here. I'm gonna send them up the fucking Harrison or whatever. I don't know what you do in terms of that.
I also have to point out that we had some of the brightest minds in the world before the Department of Education was implemented. I don't like to sound like that guy that says that the government made people, stupid, but I've looked into this, and prior to the Department of Education being implemented, students were doing better. And if we're going to also talk about these school things, I'd rather have my taxpayer money build better institutions. If you got to either get rid of the current existing ones or fund it a different way to do better. If we're paying our taxes into this, which we are, I would rather have my taxpayer money be spent better on making people educated rather than what's going on in public schools now. And if that means the eradication of the Department of Education, no one has proposed anything better. You're the only person I can think of that's trying to find a better solution than the eradication of it.
I'm pretty sure you and I, long before we had a show, I'm pretty sure you and I have been talking about this now for years. Yes. And the other proposal that I can truly come up with, because I'm concerned about these kids. I'm concerned about, because first of all, we know that one way or another, that kids, from the time they are 5 years old, the time that they are 18 years old, 8 hours a day, they have to be under the guardianship of someone. And they have to be under, the official supervision, likely of staff members at a school, or some other way to oversee them, for lack of a better term. So I don't know what you do with these kids. If you abolish the Department of Education and federally, does that then mean that public schools will just slowly begin to, shut their doors one at a time?
No, I think you would allow the states to decide what to do. If you want to get rid of it at a federal level and let the states decide how they want to do things. And I think that's how it should be done. Let the people decide how they want to do this shit. The federal government has allowed it to become, absolute shit. So I think it should go back into the hands of the people. It was better that way before the government got involved with it.
And there's already a lot. Okay, so like for an example, on the East Coast, the idea of driver's education is completely off the table in terms of public schools. However, if you grow up in Nebraska, you will likely get your driver's license as a high school student as a part of your curriculum. Your parents pay the school $200, and then 3 days a week you just stay after for like an hour and a half, for like a month or two. You take your tests and you have your fucking driver's license. And it's like that in a lot of Midwestern states and places that are still small enough that they can build that into either build it into the funding, or they have kept it in the culture that a part of high school education is learning how to operate a motor vehicle. So that is something that Maryland does not do, that Virginia does not do, that I don't think most schools on the East Coast do, but Wisconsin, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Iowa, etc., they're already doing that. The same way in Wyoming, you can now take a gaming class in Wyoming. You can take a hunting and gaming class where you are firing a gun and you are graded in public school on your handling of a rifle and how you clean it, how you aim it, how you fire it. Lovely. But that ain't going to happen in Massachusetts, is my point. So
and
we already have the freedom of flexibility. What I truly think needs to happen, I don't want to see federal funding go away. I sincerely do not, because I am afraid for the kids. A lot of these kids in low-income neighborhoods, they already are looking for a teacher to have their side because their mom is too busy doing whatever the fuck she's doing, and there is no father in the picture for a lot of these kids. And yes, we can talk about how societally we should shift to being in monogamous relationships and being married and having traditional families and all that. Great. You could put effort into that too. It's not going to change the fact that there are millions of kids in this country that if they don't eat a meal at school, they don't eat at all. And I really do concern myself for these kids. And not to be long-winded, I want to get your opinion on this too, but like, okay, we keep using Nebraska because that's just, the easiest example. Really good public schools. Okay, in Maryland, you got your problems, but for the most part, good public schools from county to county, depending on where you are. Baltimore City, they got some problems. I'd imagine inner city school, what?
Fuck New York, a lot of them suck. I'm
Right.
sorry. I'm gonna be.
Oh, of course, I'm sure they did.
Like the school that I went to was absolute shit. It was just awful. Like, for lack of a better term, the school I went to in Florida for my last 2 years of high school, that was pretty good. The schools are in Florida are pretty decent. They're pretty lively. But yeah, and I can imagine schools in Cali are probably going to run in similar circles to schools in New York.
Yeah, I've heard that Los Angeles public schools are kind of iffy. Now, look, if we are talking about in terms of public schools that, and this is going to be a weird thing too, Jim. New York City might be the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in the world, quite frankly.
Yes.
But there aren't that many people living there in comparison to the rest of America. And I know that sounds strange because the exact opposite is true in some ways. But when you think about New York City public schools, that's a very different animal than the average public school that you're going to find in a county somewhere out in a random state. Los Angeles public schools, another animal. Chicago public schools, Baltimore City public schools, St. Louis public schools. The cities are always going to have many more obstacles to get around in a teaching environment than you are going to have in the burbs. And just to keep on with our point here, I know for a fact there are plenty of high schools, or at least two that I can think of that I have been told that are not the greatest in like Omaha and areas like that. I do think city schools are the problem.
Yeah,
but I genuinely don't believe that kids are made, at least not in this country. Kids can't sit still. It didn't work when we had them sitting still for 45 minutes at a time during instruction. And it's sure as shit not working now that we have them sitting for 90 minutes for instruction.
Yeah, and my problem too is the reason why I also want to get the government away from it is that you get for example, you'll get that. I think I don't know how much you fell into this category. You get a very hyperactive boy at a young age, and rather than accepting that's how boys and men are, at a young age. We have a lot of that.
Now.
Well, yeah, but
I have
What's
weed now.
what's the
When I
school,
was a kid, not so much.
and what's the teacher in the school's solution with a psychiatrist at a school that's all federally funded? Put them on Ritalin. I just don't think if it's,
Yeah,
stuff. That's why, like, I
yeah.
don't know. The last few years, I've just kind of, I've had this sort of shift to just a lot less government would be better. And look, I'm all for advocating for kids too. Don't get me wrong. I am. I get the dilemma, but and I'm not saying this is all public schools, but you and I have read we've talked about a bit of it on here. And we've also seen in like highlights and stuff like that. You have still kids who are being sent home, for lack of a better term, soft pornography to read and shit like that. It's just,
Oh yeah, no. I
know,
trust me. I see it all, and I'm going to give you an example. And I have not discussed this on the show before, but you and I have talked about. I was a bit of a troubled kid when I was about 8, 9 years old. You and I have discussed this before.
yes.
I was expelled in first grade. I had a lot of shit going on with me. My mother, because now look, I am not saying that I'm not a psychiatrist.
Of course.
I have had plenty of psychiatrists in my life.
Yes.
When I have children, if they need psychological help, I will take them to a pediatric psychiatrist. I'm not against getting them help.
Of course.
What I am against doing, however, is there was a point in time my mom put a stop to it, but the psychiatrist wanted me on a medicine to go to bed, wanted me on a medicine to wake up, wanted me on a medicine to concentrate. Like she was trying to more or less give me, one of those like those fucking the pill boxes. Yeah. She wanted to more or less give me a fucking rotary of medications to be taking on a daily basis. And finally, my mother had enough of it and put an end to it. And I stayed on one primary medication that I absolutely needed, and that was it. So I'm totally in agreement that there's a lot of jagged edges. But the reason that I'm so concerned with leaving up to the states in the entirety of education is because, it's no secret Mississippi schools are shit. Like the entire state has awful schools.
Of course.
West Virginia, not too far from me.
Yeah.
We were thinking about, we're looking around places to settle, and I said, hey, I like the rural areas. I would like to be able to go camping and, these different things. West Virginia, Jimmy?
Yes.
Out of 50 states, West Virginia is rated 49 in education.
Yikes.
50 is Mississippi. Would you really want these people fucking in charge on a state level of what kids are learning? Kids would never learn anything. Kids would be learning how to make fucking bombs out of baking soda. If we let it up to the states,
even though citizens and students were actually smarter before the introduction of the Department of Education, that's worth noting. That is well documented that was the case before the department. This is important to note that kids and all that were smarter before the introduction of it. This is a documented thing. Yes, I think it's smarter to put it in the hands of the state than the federal fucking government. We just got done talking about how they were sending tons of fucking money to Ukraine. They were just sending a ton of dancers and shit.
Do you remember the show that we did last year when we were watching the video of the senator from California, and she would not admit that that more or less like taxpayers paid for her. Didn't it more or less pay for her and her husband to go to Switzerland or wherever it was? We watched this last year, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I'm not, they went there because something about like the LGBT youth in Sweden or some bullshit. They were going to give a speech, or I forget the whole detail. But look, I'm not saying that there are not politicians, no matter what side of the playing field that you're on, that will use money for whatever they want. That in the funding for the Department of Education, the fact that the board are making 400, 500, $1 million a year. We're not just talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some of these people are making six figures a year, Jimmy, on the federal board, while teachers continue to make next to nothing, while students are using textbooks that are a decade old. There's a lot of inconsistencies. And if you go to a
you're
school,
right. We're sending money to other countries.
But what I'm right, exactly. And if you go to a school in Baltimore County, Jimmy, you will see smart boards. Okay, you will see touchscreen technology. You will see in some places in Maryland, every high school student is assigned a laptop. In states where people aren't as kleptomatic, shall we say?
Yes.
Students are taking laptops home, and that's where their homework is. And the textbooks are on apps, they're on tablets, and all these things. And then you have other schools that literally still have textbooks from like 2007, and they have Windows XP on their fucking computers in their lab, and it's really, really outdated and underfunded and unfortunate for the kids that are there. And you go on about how we were smart before the public education system. Jimmy, Tesla and Ben Franklin and all these guys, yes, they existed before the public education system. We now have Sexy Red and Haktua fucking girl becoming billionaires with the public education system. So if we take it away, it's not going to do us any good. We have already ridded ourselves of independent intelligence.
You're never going to make an argument for me that's going to state that we need to keep
okay, Jimmy,
federal
would the founding fathers, would anybody in the 1800s buy a fucking thing that Haktua girl was selling them?
Do you think that's a product of the? I'm not saying that's a product of the fucking public education system.
Oh, absolutely. Of course it is. Of course it is.
So you're saying under the current model, which is crafted by the Department of Education, just so I understand, it crafts people like the Haktua girl. So you're saying that going back to what it was before the introduction of that would create more or less greater minds and less dipshits like Sexy Red and Haktua girl.
Well, no, because I don't think that we can go back now. We can only go forward with something else. Because if you take it away, what are you going to do?
Yeah, but here, this is the other argument I have to make. We don't decide where the money is going. You're talking about books that are like a decade old and a bunch of other shit. We're putting our taxpayer money into this, and yet teachers have to pull money out of their own pocket to buy supplies and shit like that. It's like the current model sucks. It's not a matter of going back. It's just a matter of you strip the current system and you make something better. I'm sorry, the current system is shit. It's not
I would be totally down. I would be that would be I know it would be totally down for I'm sorry, I would be totally down for a reform. A reform of some kind. Full abolishment, I just don't know where we go from there. I'm not sure what the states are going to do. Many states are going to keep the education system the way that it is, and it's going to be stifled because they're not going to receive as many taxes. State taxes will probably hike astronomically in states that are already fucking tax havens because of this. Now, if Trump and the powers that be around him were to say we're doing away with the public school model, but we have this alternative thing that is going to benefit us just as equally, then I could say sure, let's do it. But I feel that we need a reform. Teachers need to be paid more. Board members need to be paid less. Standardized testing has to go away. Stop teaching to the HSA, stop teaching to the SAT, and begin teaching about life. Bring back home ec, bring back gardening. Allow children to learn instruments. Let's do some shit that's actually going to enrich them if we're spending money on it. Because great, we can stop spending all money on public education. We can freeze it all. We can cancel it. We can dump it out. My question is, then what happens? That's all I want to know. Is then what happens? Do the kids finish out the school year? It just started.
I would say that the kids are going to finish out the school year because, like you said, it started, and then you just go on to what the new metric or model is the following year. All I know is that I don't like the Department of Education, and I know you'll talk. You can speak of the necessity of it at the current moment. I'm not convinced. I see where my taxpayer money goes, especially in regards to that. And I understand they do tell you up front when you go to be a teacher that it does not pay a lot. Fair enough. Sure, it would stand to be better if it paid more. Even if it paid a lot more than what it does, it takes issue from me when teachers have to start pulling money out of their pockets to provide basic necessities, not things that could just make their classroom better in general, but things that keep them afloat. And, I don't get to decide where my taxpayer money goes in regards to that. I have to trust the federal government, which is a fool's fucking game to begin with, to hope that this money that they are forcibly taking from me is going to be properly divvied up, but it turns out that it hasn't been. And even before the Ukraine bullshit, it was never really divvied up properly anyway. It's just this year has shown me how clownish the federal government is when it comes to fucking funds. Like the money that comes out of her pocket, it's just shit.
Right. And there has to be a reform for a lot of things. And in terms of education, the whole voucher thing is bogus. We've discussed this already.
Yes.
Way back when Betsy DeVos was proposing it in 2016, I thought it was crap. But again, okay, we are going to have to do something because the parents are never going to have the autonomy to decide where their kids go to school. You can't just say, oh, well, public school A that's in my neighborhood stinks, so let me negotiate for them to go to public school B. It's not going to work that way. But we're just going to have to clean it up and really figure out, okay, what is the solution? How can we meet in the middle and figure out what is going to make students learn, what is going to make them want to be in school, what is going to make them engage more. And honestly, I do believe cutting out the standardized testing, stop teaching to the standardized testing, and stop allocating money to states based off of how well students perform on these bogus fucking tests. And maybe then we'll see something. And pay the teachers like 10 or 15 grand more a fucking year. Come on, guys.
And
if we can fucking if we can pay for Peruvian transgender comic books, we can pay our teachers a few more a year.
And if you're gonna fucking rape me in taxes, can you make sure that teachers can just provide extra supplies that they need to rather than the bare minimum? It's just it's not up to me whether I have to pay taxes or not. Unfortunately, I have to pay them. But could you just do that? Because I don't get to this. I don't get to decide where it goes, and that's why I don't like taxes to begin with, because I'm not really deciding where it goes. It's just taken, and I have to fucking hope it goes where it's supposed to. It's a bunch of shit.
It is, and like, okay, like for example, okay, with the marijuana taxes in Maryland, they say it's going to the roads and et cetera, et cetera. I really can't tell you. Okay. I've been hearing that for years. That the lottery pays for the roads, and when my grandmother would drive down the street on shitty Baltimore roads, she'd always say, "Oh well, fuck. I guess you see how well the lottery is maintaining our roads." So, I mean, yeah, I don't know where the money goes, but I just really do think that we need to hit the pause button on this. Let's not start taking public school away, and let's just give a chance for our kids to get an education and to fucking be kids, and take the politics out of fucking school too.
Oh
and,
yeah,
and I want to say this before we get off the rails here.
Yes.
As a practicing Catholic, okay. And I will say this, and I say this on the show, and yeah, I'm having a beer right now, and some people may find a little hypocritical that I partake in adult things and still have a religious adherence, but I do. I think a lot of people that have a faith, live a little bit as well, a little grizzled by their adult life. But if I want my children to attend a Catholic institution, then I would send them there. I personally don't believe that the 10 Commandments should be posted in a public school, no more than I think that we need to have the rainbow flag and all these other things posted in schools. It should be irreligious. It should be apolitical. It should be a safe space for kids to just be kids, and these conversations do not need to come up. And that's the other thing, Jimmy, that I'm really going to admit with you. If we saw the politicization of everything sort of just boil out of grade school culture, a lot more parents would be down with keeping public schools intact. But that's my 2 cents.
No, I agree. If it's just when it gets to the high school level, I understand that's where a lot of that stuff's going to get introduced, and fair enough, I get that. But I just, as it is now, I'm not. I'm just not, yet again, I don't like where my taxpayer money is going. And like I said, the stuff with the U.S. aid and all this other shit kind of made me realize that it's not going where it's supposed to. And when
we see those numbers, it is rather steep.
Yeah. And, I just, I think it's important to teach, kids about how to balance a checkbook, how to change a flat tire, how, shop class, all of these important classes. And I know this might piss some people off. I'm all for accepting people as much as the other guy, but it's like, you got to really learn that in high school. You have to learn how to be accepting in high school. You can't just, that's one of those things you have to just fucking figure out on your own. And if you know what I mean?
But see, though, looking back,
or better yet, that should be on the parents to teach their kids that. And this is the other thing why I take kind of umbrage in how, you know, the public schools are ran now. If the parents need to decide particular lessons to teach, because I'm not saying teachers can't drop words of wisdom or anything like that. I would expect that. I had some great wisdoms and great teachings that came from teachers that were outside of the standard curriculum, but it was nothing malicious. It was stuff that some of us needed to hear. But I don't need, you know, for like, for example, if I'm, I'll give you an example. If I'm teaching kids and there's a picture of me, and let's say in this analogy I'm gay. Let's say there's a picture of on my desk of me and my partner. If some child who's like, let's say they're like 9, ask me who that is, I have it on myself to say, you know, say in a proper tone, you know, you just say, you know, in a polite tone, you say that's, you know, nothing you need to worry about. You know, not like you got to keep the personal and professional separate. It's not to say I don't want to tell that child that. It's just not my place to do so. Maybe when they're older, if they ask, I don't mind sharing them because they're much older and there's a good chance they're no longer in my classroom and I can have a different sort of relationship with them. Whereas if they are like, it's just that the personal is bleeding way too much into the professional and it's causing a lot of fucking problems.
Right. And like when I was a kid, you know, I didn't know. I mean, yeah, if my teachers had a wedding ring on their finger and maybe they would make a reference to my husband or my wife, or they would talk with their kids or whatever, and it would be just a quick in and out little story.
Yeah.
They wouldn't open up their class with, oh, you know, I'm, you know, pansexual and et cetera, et cetera. And there's just a lot of, and I'm not saying that happens in most schools either, but there's a lot of weirdness on social media. There's a lot of noisemakers that are representing things that are likely not even happening in schools in your area, but you're hearing of it, you're seeing of it. And because of this, we feel like, you know what, grades are dropping, dropout rates are soaring. You know, overall testing averages are at a national low. So I get why those would be enough sore marks against the education system. But to me, I don't know. I feel like there's a solution there somewhere. We're not hitting it yet. But I don't know. You know, it's wild, man. It really is. And I feel that you know, like being in school, how often when you were in school, did your teacher even get through instruction? How often could your teacher even finish a sentence that they were of something they were teaching about without a disruption, without someone cracking a joke, without someone throwing something? Probably almost never, I'd imagine.
You probably don't want to use me as an example because I was in a lot of like advanced classes and shit like that. So it was pretty much you were paying attention and there was really no like distractions. It was pretty much you were just everyone knew to just sit there, shut the fuck up and lock in because this was what our lives were about. Just fucking the educational grind is what we're about. But I would say in an average level class, you're going to have the class clown who sits in the back and they're looking to be. There's a difference between a class clown that's more innocent. That's just, you're going to expect that versus, how am I going to navigate? How am I going to learn to do like my taxes, or how am I going to be more well read with like reading particular pieces of literature when I have to learn how to fucking refer someone by proper fucking pronouns? I'm sorry. I'm not trying I'm not trying to be that guy. I don't have an issue with doing that. But if I'm like a 15-year-old boy and you're trying to prep me for the real world, I need real world stuff. I need real life advice, not something that my parents can sit down and have it told to me in a fucking minute.
Right. And even better, we're talking about this before. You're saying, if you are confronted with varying pieces of literature, if you're assigned to read Moby Dick, how in the hell would you ever even get through it? Being's the fact that 90% of the time, as I said before, there's a lot of classroom interruption. When I was in high school, as a freshman in high school, I had this teacher. Her name was Miss Chesney. And Miss Chesney, like the first or second day that she worked at the school, she was standing on top. You know how like in the science classrooms they had those big tables with the long black, like really thick countertops on them. Jim?
Yes.
Like this long? Well, she was standing on top, and she was a big woman, okay? She was probably every bit of 260, 270, and her big ass is standing on top of a table trying to reach something on top of a cabinet. She falls off, breaks her arm, and then like almost every Friday, she's nowhere to be seen. We would have substitutes every Friday.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, Jimmy. The black kids, and this is not like, this is just, I'm just being honest.
Of course.
The black kids would get on one side of the room. The Hispanic kids would get on the other side of the room. And they would start throwing textbooks and pencils and chairs at each other. Not because they disliked each other, but just for fun. And that was the kind of shit that I had to contest with as a young lad in public school.
Oh yeah, I had similar instances like that. I remember going to a public school in New York of all places. We had like the cops fucking raid our school constantly. There was a kid one time who got his locker raided. He had like brass knuckles. He had like a couple of Glocks in there. He was all like, he was ready to fucking go. He was fucking strapped. He used his locker, for lack of a better term, was pretty much an armory for what it was.
That's nuts.
I'm not gonna look. I'm not saying you're not gonna have crazy stuff, but there's crazy stuff that happens naturally. Like things that are going to happen. You're always going to have a class clown. You're always going to have people who fuck around for the sake of it. You're going to have kids that use their lockers for less than desirable things. But there are things that happen, right now in the public schools that just don't need to be there. It's not natural. It's a forced, intrusive sort of thing. And when you're also leaving parents out of the decision making, which is a big problem for me, something's got to give.
Can we also start talking about how, if we are going to reform the public education system, carton milk and squared pizza and all of this crap being served in the cafeterias, that's not exactly food that is that makes students awake and lively and engaged in instruction.
Well, to be fair, you can blame Michelle Obama for the.
Michelle Obama tried. I'll give her that. She tried.
Well, when she tried to cut back on school lunch, and it's just like
shit food, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, why the fuck would you do that? It's just no. I think
cut back on the shit food, yeah.
No, I think to just end it. I think to just end that conversation where it is. I think some change has to come from it. We have we both want the same thing. I think we just have different ways of getting there. You
Yeah.
know, that's how I see it.
You know, and yeah, and that's, you know, and that's going to be that. But yeah, Jim, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
I kind of hope that it doesn't.
I hope.
But before things get too dicey, I am going to, because I am seeing that I'm losing. I have one bar already, and you're kind of I can hear you, but you're going from like, and I can see you, but then you're getting a little choppy.
Okay.
It's fucking StreamYard.
Well, I think we
Um,
should do. Let's just wrap it up then.
and that's fine. It was a good show.
It was.
And we will chat.
Yes. Yes.
All righty.
Alrighty.